Welcome to If Prices Could Talk, the podcast where we dive into the art and science of pricing, sales, and negotiation. I'm your host, Tracy Dent. Join me as we explore strategies and current events shaping the future of pricing power in B2B, featuring insights from industry leaders and subject matter experts. Let's jump into today's conversation.
Little known fact, he also worked together when I was on the director path. I was in a leadership development program that they threw us into this crazy 72 hours where all of the senior leaders got to watch. It was like being in a little, incubator, and everyone was watching us as we interacted with one another. And they threw real life scenarios on it, like scenarios on you, like, oh, you just, contaminated milk. You just delivered to thousands of people and now people are dying. How do you respond to this? You have to talk to the chairman of the board, or you have to talk to your PR relations person. And a 3-day leadership development program where you throw people basically into the water without a life raft and say go is very fun. And G got to watch us all do that.
Oh my God. How long ago was this? Like 15 years ago?
Ooh.
Oh my God, maybe even longer.
Yeah, probably 15 years.
Well, maybe we start there because Kelly, from what I see from your experience, you've spent 15 years at Ingram. You spent 7 or 8 years at Jabra. So can you walk us through a little bit of your experience, and then we'll take us back. We'll do a little history with just your work with Jeet and how you know each other and some of the things that you've been through the years.
Yeah. So, hi, thanks so much, Tracy. My name is Kelly Nagel. For those of you who don't know me, I have been in the IT world for almost 30 years. I spent nearly 20 years with Ingram Micro, which is how I got my start. I actually went to school for hotel restaurant management degree and was hoping to become the general manager of some amazing hotels. But instead, I pivoted and found an exciting and rewarding career in tech working with Ingram Micro. And then from there, I went on to work with several vendors such as Okidata, and then my last position within Jabra as the president of the North American business, which is where I was for 8 years. And then most recently, I've been a strategic advisor with the WIT Network. And then I just recently opened my own business as a coach and a consultant.
Exciting.
That's awesome.
Very exciting. Well, I think we should start with, because a lot of the topics that we cover on the podcast, we talk about pricing, sales, the intersection between the two, how you two know each other is, if I'm understand properly, Kelly was leading part of a sales division at Ingram Micro, and then Jeet was leading analytics. So can you take us back a little bit of how you two were working together, pricing, sales, how you drive alignment across the teams, see what we can uncover?
Yeah, I think Jeet and I first started working together when I was leading the Pro AV and the specialty business. So back in the day, Ingram was operating as one geographical focused sales organization, where if you were managing a team that had like central United States as your business, and then what Ingram shifted to was becoming more experts and business unit driven. So I actually took on a new assignment to take everything that was not like each other, Apple business, Pro AV business, document imaging, et cetera, and brought a team together. And then with the use of Jeet's team, giving us analytics to understand these customers and how they were different and what we needed to do to get their business. So we worked hand in hand to understand, because we didn't really understand this business. We weren't a specialized distributor. There were specialized distributors that were working with the AV, the Apple customers, and such and such. So really, when you work with a team like Jeet's giving us analytics and information, we could take that and create action plans and programs to go after this business. And we were the most successful team in the US at the time. Our growth was 2 to 3x what other teams were doing because of the work with the BI team.
It's interesting, working with Kelly, and there were others also. Bill was part of it, and Susan O'Sullivan and others. You grow up, and I grew up very analytical, and most of my jobs were very analytical. And Ingram, one of the best things I took away from Ingram was that marriage of analytics with relationships. And I didn't quite understand the relationship part until I met people like Kelly and Susan and others, where they're so good about influencing, using data, using, your insights, but influencing people to do the right things based on that information. And that piece of it is such an important piece of not just pricing or analytics, it's just of doing business and doing the right things. And organizations like Ingram does a good job of managing those relationships and using insights to drive behavior the right way. It was very good learning for me during those times, for sure.
And people buy from people, and that's what we always said. People don't buy from an
Yeah.
unknown or a bot. You have to, if you don't have those relationships, then you can't take that next step. So you can have all the information in the world, but if you don't have the foundation of trust and that early relationship started and established, they won't trust you to do anything, and they won't trust the information that you're giving them. So it's really
Yeah.
important to have that balance.
Kelly, as a sort of if you can think back to when you were first starting out, in sales, where did you have any tricks to how you built that trust, especially, working in a very male-dominated environment? You're talking about IT, you're talking about sales, you're talking about all these things. It's extremely male-dominated, and to build that trust from the beginning is something that I'm sure is difficult for a lot of people coming into this field. What were some of your tricks that you used?
Honestly, it was curiosity.
Mm.
And also, as my one friend Susan O'Sullivan says, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you talk. And I'm a very good listener. I use my active listening skills. I would listen for cues. I would write down when they talked about their children or their wives or what they like to do on the weekends. And I would go back to that. And I'm like, hey, Joe, how'd you play this week? What was your score? And he's like, oh, you remembered I was going golfing. I'm like, yes. And I'm like, and how's Joey or Susie? And he'd be like, oh, they're great. So I became an extension. It wasn't just a business relationship. We had a friendship and a foundation. And with that, I would give advice, or I would say, why don't you choose to do, or why don't you try this? And they would 9 out of 10 times take my advice because we had that trust and we had built that relationship. So
Yeah.
I think just leaning into your curiosity, asking questions, listening more than you talk creates a really solid foundation for a relationship.
Yeah, I think, you yourself and Susan and others, you guys also did a good job of understanding the client's business, and that's where, we partnered together quite a bit on understanding the client's business from a data perspective, and then also to understand their motivation and their, what they were trying to do strategically that you guys knew about. And I think that marriage of the personalization of the relationship plus the knowledge of the market and the company itself, that I feel like is sort of the holy grail that people go after. Because, we go out and we talk to salespeople all the time, and a lot of them are like, "Hey, I have great relationships. Don't worry about that. I know, the kids' birth dates. I know all these personal things," which is all a good thing, but they don't know anything about the business.
Right.
Or they're very analytical. They know everything about the market and business, and they don't know what motivates them from a personal perspective, your contact, and you miss out on that, and that balance, that marriage has to be there in these relationships.
100%. And one of the things I think also that helped me with success was being a connector. So if someone said, I really want to I want to become a Cisco certified partner, and I would listen for these cues, or what areas are you thinking of going into, or what have you, talked about your maybe someday list, and how can I help you? How can I be a partner to you? Who can I bring in or introduce you to help you get that off the ground? So I had a partner for years, and his business was shifting because one of the biggest vendors that he did business with was taking his biggest customers direct. So that was a threat to him. So he had to rebuild his business. And he said to me, Kelly, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, tell me some of the wins you've had recently that we could maybe build upon. So he had a few wins. It was in security, and he was creating some amazing things in the Chicagoland area. And it was actually through a connection that I helped him make that he got someone higher up at HP. He started building custom systems that went into the transit system, the airports, anything within the transportation area in Chicago. And he started doing this elsewhere, and his business was booming. And his business, he basically almost lost his business because of a shift in how his customers bought. And due to connections and me in making introductions and helping him and listening to some of the wins he had, I was able to help him move in a different direction. So I think, like you said, it's not just to have those personal and know them from a personal standpoint, but also understand their business and listen for cues and make introductions.
Yeah, that's great. What, as you sort of evolved in your career, it doesn't have to be Ingram specific or Jabra or anything like that. One of the things that we do at Holden is obviously we help our clients negotiate better. And I find it always interesting how that personalization, that connection of human to human that we were talking about gets so muddied with the elements of the contract that you're trying to negotiate,
Mm-hmm.
You have any advice or stories that we can learn from your experience? And it doesn't have to be anything specific, but in general, in sort of dealing with some of these large contracts.
I think there's, yeah, we've won some big contracts and lost some big contracts, and then had some that just continued on because of the service that you were able to provide. I always look at it and say, what is going to differentiate you from someone else? What are you going to do differently? And it might not be, oh, I'm going to give you the best. Price is never the sole reason why someone is going to win. It's how are you going to be there to partner along the way? What are you going to do differently? And I'll give you an example. When I was with Jabra, we had a very, very large global customer, and we had an issue that happened in one of their facilities, and we had to go in and rip out equipment from locations all across the world, and we had to do it in a very short period of time. And this was one of our biggest, actually was our biggest global account. And what started as a fire, a massive fire, turned into a relationship which is stronger than ever because of the way that the team reacted and how they move forward with it. So again, it was doing what you say you're going to do, under promise, over deliver, keep your commitments, be there every step of the way, give updates if you've got something, that's maybe not going well. It's give updates when things are going well. Don't just go vacant. Don't just say, just be out of the picture for 7 days and the other person's wondering, what's going on? You don't have to be in touch 24/7, but you have to continue. Hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm still working on this. Here's where we are. Let's plan to meet this day. Again, continuous communication. I think it's so important that what happens is, people make assumptions. And if they don't hear from you, they assume that you're not doing anything with it. When in fact, you could be, at the 7th mile of the 8-mile race. You just haven't given them updates. So really having that clear communication is so key.
Yeah.
I feel like that's it's really good advice, and I think that's very underrated. And I feel like as humans, like you said, we fill the gaps, and when we fill the gaps, it's usually with negativity.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario. Right. And if I think back to all the negotiations that I've been part of, or I've helped, or something or heard of, one thing that sticks with me is that trust piece. And the trust piece is usually built off of something negative. And when we're in it, we think the world is ending. This will never come back. Oh my God. And we create this universe in our heads of something so negative, when in reality, it's an opportunity for you to showcase how you handle yourself in that situation, which will lead to bigger and better things, not necessarily with that partner, but with others. And the way you handle yourself is so important during tough times. That'll really bear fruit later on in your negotiations. It's definitely a common denominator.
And the other thing people forget to do is ask for referrals. Ask for a referral. You do a great job for somebody. Hey, you were so happy with what I did for you. Is there anyone else you feel could benefit from a relationship, a contract negotiation, or whatever it is that I did for you? Would you be willing to give a referral or introduce me to somebody? What's the worst thing that they can say is no. What's the best thing they can say? They can give you 10 referrals and you got a new business.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so Kelly, you've worked in big companies. You've probably led a lot of very complicated initiatives, to say the least. And I thought it would be good to talk a bit about, like, how do you drive influence for something? How do you get people's buy-in? There's so many different ways to think about this and ways that people talk about it. But I thought we could unpack a couple examples and just see what kind of takeaways you've had from these large projects, because you've got getting buy-in from people internally. You've got ways that you get people to take action even when it doesn't maybe necessarily fit their number one priority. So there's so many different layers to this. Let's start with, like, can you think about a time where you've been working to roll something out, or you've been working to get people's buy-in, and just tell us about like what happened, what were the things that you took away from that, and we'll just kind of look at it from different angles there.
I think there's a few times, but if I think of one specifically, it was probably when I started working at Jabra, taking over for the former president, who was a formidable British man who I still talk to and get his advice. However, we had a very lofty goal that everyone thought was unachievable. And I always say when there's something like that that's happened, is how do you get people to buy in? How do you get people to go along with this? So our goal was to get to 50% market share. And it was a funny year because I was turning 50, as were several of my senior leadership team members, and we created this road to 50. And everyone knew what the goal was. And I think so many times companies or organizations roll something out that not everyone understands. And how do you simplify that message? How do you keep them updated on where you're looking to go? And it doesn't have to be so complex. Well, here's all the charts and the graphs, and let's just say simple. Where are we on the graph? Where's the thermometer? How are we trending? Are we hitting the metrics? Are we losing? And every month we gave updates, and even more. And people knew, and they were all talking about it. And that's what creates momentum. And if you have everyone that's rowing the boat in the same direction, you're going to get there a lot faster than everyone rowing in different directions, which is what I find a lot of the ways there's confusion, or it's not clear, or people don't know their role in getting to this finish line.
That's probably where listening plays a big role as well. There's probably so many people who were either resistant in one way or another. And based on what you said earlier, there's likely places where things would escalate, and just by listening, you could take a lot of that resistance out. How does that play out in your experience?
I think listening is key. I've done small roundtables. I mean, you can get in a big town hall and you can have everyone there and everyone's nodding their head, but you know that not everyone understands. And so if you want to get down and really have an understanding, it's pulling small groups, having an open and honest conversation, creating a safe environment to hear the pros and the cons, or the fence sitters versus the ones that are charging the way, or the ones that are saying, "Oh, I'm not doing that at all." I mean, Jeet and I can talk through several things that we worked at Ingram Micro that you knew people weren't moving along with. And I think it's understanding what's stopping them, creating, again, clear directions, helping them along the way, having support, having good project management, having folks that can lean in and be a part of that conversation or help coach them individually, then gets you much faster to where you're looking to go, versus if you just roll something out in a big group and assume that everyone is going to go ahead with it. You know what they say about assume. So you don't want to do that. So I think it's really important when you have those clear conversations, more intimate level, that you really have a better understanding of how you're getting there, and if you're getting there at the right pace.
One of the things that it's always interesting to me is we have this world where we talk about B2B and we talk about B2C. And we talk a lot about B2B is very sort of ROI related. And when you're talking about personal life versus work life, you have to be very professional. It's very sort of ROI related. What's the business objective? What's the return? Those types of conversations. And what I'm really seeing is this merger of B2B and B2C, where it's really person to person. So influence to me is really a function of understanding what motivates that individual, not just from a business career, perspective or their objectives of their role or function, but also personally. What do they want to achieve personally? Where do they want to leave their mark? What makes them happy? What makes them sad? What makes them uncomfortable? Trying to understand that, so you present what you want to do in relative terms to their world. Because we all live in our own bubble, we all live in our own world, and we have to understand somebody else's world so we can position our thoughts the right way so they can understand and they can see the impact to their world. Because otherwise, you think that the other person's going to destroy your world. You know, they're going to come in and it'll be invasive. So if you can kind of understand that, I think you will make better progress. And that's especially true like for a function like pricing as an example. You know, we are obviously pricing is a vertical, but it's actually a horizontal where you have to work with sales. You have to work with marketing, you have to work with product, you have to work with everybody to be able to influence them and what the right price is or the right package or the offering or whatever it might be, and you have to speak in their language, all these different people. So you, as a pricer, you almost have to understand what motivates a salesperson. And it's not just money, by the way. You know, people say salespeople are coin operated and things like that. Yes, you know, we're all coin operated to a certain extent, but there's also all these other factors that are personal, not personal, you know, career wise, that are all in there that you really have to understand. And you know, to me, that's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned at Ingram was that piece of it. You know,
Funny you say that. I had a gentleman who worked for me, and he said, "Oh, my wife only looks for." He goes, "She loves Patagonia." And I said, "Why does she love Patagonia?" He goes, "Because they're socially responsible." He's like, tells me all the reason. He goes, "Because the price is the last factor on why we buy. She buys for the brand and all the good that they're doing in the world, not about price."
yeah. Yeah, it's incredible, you know, and I'm sure Kelly, you know, especially at Jabra, you guys probably did a lot of market studies to understand, you know, why do people buy Jabra products, you know, what makes them, and our as humans, every study that I've ever done, prices never ever have been like the number one thing, even in commodities. It's the relationship, it's like how you're going to solve my problem, it's availability when I need it,
Yeah.
all of these things respectively to each other is so much more important than price. Price is almost like a table stake. Yes, you can't try to sell me a water for $1,000. You know, there is a theoretical maximum that's there, but in general, relative to all the other components, it's really not that high, and it's surprising. You know, most people are very surprised by it.
You're absolutely right. And you made an interesting comment about, talking to different people and how to get the point across. And one of the things I always tell people is think about storytelling. And if you've read the book Weekend Language,
Mm,
if you go to a barbecue or a party on the weekend, you're not going to, show charts and graphs and a PowerPoint presentation about what you do, but you're going to have a conversation. And when I was a job bar and I was at a party, I'd always ask like, oh, I want to weave in, like, what are they using for their audio endpoints
mm,
when they're talking to customers? And so I would ask, like, it's not like, do you ever have a conversation and you're talking to someone on business and you just can't hear what they're saying, or you're struggling and you're not getting your point across, or they're saying huh or asking you. I said, do you ever think about maybe your vehicle, your headset, or your speakerphone that you're using might be causing that? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that.
mm.
And it was funny when you give real life examples or you share something, a story that creates an emotional response. That's how people remember what you do or what you're trying to sell them. So it's really important how you tell your story.
I was just curious when what you said, Kelly, about like, the market research, the studies that you've done. Did you have things that surprised you when you were kind of looking at insights for why people bought from Jabra, and things that you were like, I never thought that that would be a priority?
Yes, I think, one of the things was packaging became a huge piece. People were thinking about the environment and the packaging, like your packaging is too big. And I'm like, I never thought about that. And so creating environmentally friendly, or how we use packaging, or we went with a company that was more expensive, but they planted X amount of trees for every package that we bought. And it was a sustainable packaging, and people responded like through the roof. And I thought, wow, I was surprised at how much of an impact that actually had. But when we did studies and research, they said, your packaging is hard to open, there's too much plastic, why can't you just make it a simple package? And so we did.
that's something that I feel like I always learn from Jeet's team too, is like that when people are looking for insights, there a lot of things get validated, but there's always some surprise. And there's always some like, oh, we hadn't really gone down that trail in that way. And I feel like those are also the places where the needle can move the most, to your point. That's very cool.
It's for us, it's always when we go into clients, we always say, oh, how many we're talking to salespeople, let's say, we always ask the question, what portion of your customer base is price sensitive, like are true price buyers, right? And most of the time, especially younger salespeople will be like, it's like 60%, 80%, 90% price buyers. And in reality, price buyers are like less than 20, percent. It's just the reality of it, and people can pretend to be price buyers, of course, especially in a negotiation, but that doesn't mean that they're truly price buyers. True price buyers switch. If it's $100 product and you can give it to somebody else gives you that product for 50 cents cheaper, the real price buyers will switch. And in most cases, people are not like that. They maintain that relationship for many other reasons than just that price point. So for us, it's always interesting to do these studies and find that especially younger salespeople have a different perception of what the interactions are like because they're still trying to develop the relationships. So they have this like almost a fear factor that's in there. And as they gain more experience, that fear kind of starts dissipating, where they become more collaborative, they become sort of more co-creatives. There's a lot more approachable, and it gets better over time. So it's fascinating to me every time I go into these rooms and to see young salespeople and how they talk about their customers.
I'm curious of how many of them don't know the power of the pause, or will he or she who talks first loses, so they already want to negotiate down their price. You put out a price, and before you even let the other party respond, you're already like, okay, what if I could discount that by 20%? There's just pause, have them elaborate, bring on more. Don't already give them a discount without knowing that there's even an objection, because there might not be.
Yeah. That's probably the most fun is the RFP responses. We'll help a client set up a packet for a response, and we're still in the process of setting up a packet. When the sales guy will go, there's no way they're going to pay $100. We have to go in with 80. And then somebody will say 80, no way, it's got to be in the 70s. And you're like, you have to say time out. We're in the middle of responding to the RFP. We haven't even responded yet. They haven't even said it's too high. There's nothing, and you're already negotiating with yourselves to make sure it's the lowest possible. Because, then it's like, where do you have to go from there? You're going to be unprofitable at that point.
And what aren't you going to be able to, what values are they looking for? The intangibles that you haven't even brought up yet, that you can't even add in because they're going to be cost prohibitive. So it's interesting.
I remember some of the big contracts that we would negotiate at Ingram when we were there. And I'm sure, Kelly, you remember like some of these large customers, and you're talking about a $300 million contract, $400, $500
million. Yeah. With how many lines of business?
Yeah. Right. And you go line item by line item. And Tracy, distribution is really high revenue like that, right? 3, 4, we're in the billions, right? As a company, but these contracts are enormous because you're dealing with a really large, reseller, basically a large company. But as you go through the line items of what they're promising to buy for the next 5 years or whatever it is, the profitability on each one of these things are in basis points. So it's like, a penny for every dollar is the margin that's on these things. It's insane how small it is. And your overall profitability is just like razor thin. So if you start negotiating against yourself before you even get to the table, you have no room, like zero, unless you are saying to yourself, you're going to do this business at below cost. It'll be unprofitable and you just want the revenue. Yeah, it's just those negotiations were insane. They were absolutely crazy. I still can't believe they do that. I don't know if they still do that. Do they have negotiations?
I think they do, because
they do.
The only reason I know is I was still dealing with some of those large resellers when I was at Jabra, and I know our business was at one location and it switched to another distributor, so they are still having those negotiations.
Oh,
It's interesting, like in how many ways some things are modernizing so much. And in some cases, I'm still so surprised that things that are still done largely the same are the way that people talk about things, which has stayed some of the tactics that people try, which have stayed around for a long time that I'm always like, I can't believe people still say things like that. Like you need to sharpen your pencil. And like we heard that the other day from somebody, and I'm like, wow, there's some things that really like kind of have this, I don't know, staying power in terms of how people think negotiations should go and ways that just like kind of sticks around for a long time. Have you seen things like that lately, Kelly, in different negotiations or other people's examples that you're like, wow, I can't believe this is still around?
It's interesting. I'm facilitating a sales training with a large B2C organization with Susan O'Sullivan, and listening to these sales reps and coming in with some of their challenges or their opportunities. And so many times they're just leading with price. Well, when if I get you the lowest price, will you switch with me? Not asking more intuitive questions like, when's the last time you explored other opportunities for your insurance, or what's important to you about your provider, or what about being safe and protected? Like, forget about lowest price. Think about, you tell a story. One of the VPs told a story about how they knew someone who had a severe car accident and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. And he said, thank goodness they had the right coverage to protect them. So think about telling a story where, I know someone who had a terrible accident, and had they not been covered properly, they would have been in serious debt. They would not have been able to pay for this. So, again, evoking something where you're taking them through a journey, and they're like, well, I don't want that to be me. So price is definitely not going to be the most important at that aspect in that scenario.
How often do you do these sales trainings, Kelly?
This is new. This is part of the new business, and working with a dear friend of ours. And this is the first one she's facilitated, but I will tell you, it's been received extremely well. So
Oh, that's
I
great.
imagine there will be more to come.
Oh, that's awesome. What just for our audience sake, what do you guys cover typically in a session like that?
So it's a consultative sales training. It goes over the course of 2 days. So we're talking through, ways to improve your sales skills, really improving your listening skills, probing questions, commitment questions, how to ask the right questions, how to phrase it properly, how, stop asking with the closed-ended questions so you can gather more information to be able to get to the win for both of you. And I think, this is an organization that hasn't done training in many years. And I think there's a lot of organizations that have, if they look at the way they're operating, it's been interesting times, right? During the pandemic, either your business was going gangbusters, or, you're almost shuttering. And so if you look at investments and where companies have been making investments, it's not been in the soft skills or the sales skills that their people need to be competitive or to be more successful. So I'm really excited to see the journey that these sales reps go on, and what their outcome is, how they make more money, how they make the company more money, and how they don't give away profit or don't discount. They're going to sell because they've already understand what a win-win looks like, and they've come to the right offering or the right conclusion for both parties.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really
How do
good.
how do you find that people change the most in your observations over the
Oh
last
yeah.
little bit?
So
Yeah.
I will tell you that we had one who said she could not use the power of the paw. She's like, there's no way. I know my customers that I've been dealing with them for 30 years, and they come back to me. And when she did it in a role play, and she tried it, and then she tried it at home, we gave them a little homework and said, see what happens when you listen more than you talk. And she said, okay, I see it now. So I'm interested to see how she's going to put that into action, because we're going to have some virtual sessions with them to come back and see how they've been putting what they learned into practice, and what's working and what they might still need help with, and to hear some successes. So I think when you hear someone from, I've been here for 30 years, you can't teach me anything, and then they walk away with, thank you, I really think this is going to help me increase my business even more.
feel like in a lot of these relationships, like business or otherwise, you get in these kind of grooves where you are used to interacting with people a certain way. And I would imagine a lot of what you're doing, Kelly, is kind of like interrupting those in the best ways so that people are more like less on autopilot in a lot of these conversations.
And we want them to try something different, to get out of the old habits. This is all about, you know, this from our world, cross-selling, upselling, and there's so many more things you could have added on to that order. Don't just stop when they say yes to that piece. Now they already said yes. Now try to add on this, that, or the other thing that goes along with it. But maybe think about putting little bits along the way and testing for commitment. So you won't just want to say at the end, oh, and do you want to add this, this, and this? But hopefully during the conversation, you said, oh, have you thought about travel insurance in case to keep you safe if anything happens along the way, or, you know, create something else that you can add into that conversation. So they see how it could work. So I'm really happy to see what happens after this, how they put it in action.
That's great. I love it.
That's
Maybe we end it with one question. So
Yeah.
one story, maybe, Kelly, that was sort of a big trajectory changer for you in your career.
A big trajectory changer in my career. Well, I would say as I was very happy in my role as president and general manager at Jabra, and I was asked to leave. So that was an interesting conversation. I didn't expect it. It was the gift that I didn't know that I wanted or needed, but I did. I took a year off and really evaluated what I was doing and what I wanted to do. And I looked at the things that I was passionate about, the things that I was leaning into versus the things that were making my shoulders go up to my ears when I thought about that. And I was intentional about what I did in that year. I spent time with my aging mother who was having health problems. I was working with an amazing organization, the WIT Network. So I volunteered my time there because I felt it was very important.
Mm.
And I decided to go back and get my professional coach certification because I loved mentoring and coaching mid and early career men and women. So I did that. And had I have just continued on with that career trajectory where I was, I would have wound up at another, you know, senior leadership position, probably traveling 3 to 4 weeks a month, not seeing my family and not being true to who I am. And so this time I got off the ride and I created my own ride. And I'm so happy with what I've done. So I think that's probably the most change I've had in my 56 years of my life.
That's awesome.
Big
I love
pivot.
that. That's a great note to end this podcast on. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so much
joining
for the
us.
time. This was great.
Yeah.